everybody, and welcome to Bits of Board, where we're talking board games, miniatures, cards, and dice. My name's Michael, and today we're checking out a game by the name of Black Rose War. Now, this is from Ludus Magnus Studios, and the last release from these guys was the wonderful Sign Tempora, a sci-fi tactical strategy game with this cool overarching story. You got to play through scenarios. Wonderful stuff there. Their next release, this one here, Black Rose War, is not at all really like that. It's got the same amazing miniature quality, but this one is not an overarching story. This is pure PvP, mage versus mage carnage. Yes, it's got some deck building. Yes, it's got some area control, but man, if it is not the most ruthless game I've played in a little while, I don't know what is. Now, in today's vid, we're going to run through a bit of the learning side of things. We're going to have a look at some gameplay. Not heaps of it though. It is a PvP game. There's only so much I can fake going on there. But after that, we'll have a look at a bit of the box contents, and then come back and have a bit of a chat about what I thought about the game. That said, guys and gals, let's get into it. Let's start with the tour. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is the full map setup for a 4-player game of Black Rose Wars. In the center, we have the Black Rose Room. Next to it, the Throne Room, and surrounding them, a ton of unique rooms that players can use as mages to gain more power and turn the tides of battle. Because after all, that is what this game is about. Pure player versus player, mage destruction and chaos. Each space on the map represents a room to which the mages can move and utilize for their gain. From them, they may cast their spells, wreaking havoc and gaining points to see who can be the one to appease the Black Rose artifact. To begin a game, players will take turns in deciding which of the 4 base game characters they will be. We have Nero, a mage who by default specializes in the School of Destruction. Rebecca, who specializes in Necromancy. Jafar, who specializes in Divination. And Tessa, Master of Transmutation. During setup, players will choose a color, randomly determining their starting position on the board. In a 4-player game, each mage starts in one of the 4 corners of the map. Players should gather their player board and all tokens in their starting color, including protection and trap tokens, action tokens, damage and instability tokens, and rose pins, which will be used to identify a player's evocations. One player will be given the start player token, and this will be determined by the last person to have given or received a rose. And then players should form their grimoire, the spells that each mage will enter the game with. The game's Codex Arcanum gives the characters a favored school of magic, but players are not restricted into choosing this. These schools are represented by the decks of spells available to players throughout the game. We have 6 schools: Destruction, Illusion, Transmutation, Divination, Necromancy, and Conspiracy, and also the spells Forgotten. These are the epic spells available to only the most powerful mages. In turn order, players may choose a school, and once selected are unavailable for other players in the game. Each school's reference cards shows the 2 starting decks available for players in their school. These contain a title and a list of cards available in the deck that will form the player's grimoire. After selecting their school, players should gather these cards and their 3 custom spells, adding 1 to their grimoire and shuffling the other 2 into the draw pile. Players should shuffle their grimoire and place it off to the side of their board. And once everyone's done, the game is set to begin. Each mage begins in their player-coloured cell tile. These are special rooms only available to the mage that calls them home. If a mage were to die out on the battlefield, they would return to the cell, respawned and ready to begin combat again. But they're not allowed to hide away in these, and by the end of a player's activation, they must have left their cell. Now, while I agree there is certainly a lot going on the board, I gotta say that this game is dead simple. And it's one of those cases where we're going to learn how to play by playing. Each turn of the game is divided into 6 phases. The first is the Black Rose phase, which is kind of like an event phase that pushes the game towards its close. The second phase is the Study phase, where we draw cards from our grimoire into our hands. The third phase is the Preparation phase, which is where all the meat and veg of this game come into play. We choose some of the cards in our hands to play, but we have to determine upfront the order in which we play them, with very little room for further customization. The fourth phase is the Action phase, where players will resolve actions and cast their prepared spells, hopefully damaging and taking out other mages in the process. The fifth phase is the Evocation phase, where players can control any of their summoned minions on the battlefield. And finally, the sixth phase is our Cleanup. Should any mage or the Black Rose itself reach 30 or more points, the game is over and scoring commences. Players will score points based on their position on the Black Rose track and will score first, second, and participation points across a couple of other areas: completed quests and trophies gained for defeating mages, and then any points for any rooms that they've been credited for destroying. Finally, the player with the first player token will gain a sneaky 1 extra point, and then the winner is crowned with ties being awarded down to the most completed quests, trophies, and then if there's still a tie, the player with the crown will decide. Now, before we get into it, just a quick word on the map. As you can see, it's all been randomly arranged, except the Black Rose room must be in the middle and next to the throne room. Every single room has an activation token, which is flipped after the room is activated, but these are also the trophies taken when a room is destroyed, but we'll talk about that shortly. All you really have to know for setup is the only room that does not have an activation token on it right now is the Black Rose room, which cannot be activated until the second phase of the game. Now, for ease of playing, we're just going to do a 2-player run here. So I'm just going to get rid of a couple of those scoring tokens, leaving us with Rebecca, Nero, and the Black Rose token, all starting on the 0 position on the Black Rose track. Here we can see we're in the First Moon phase, and as such we'll be using the First Moon quests and the First Moon events, but rest assured there is a deck of cards for every single phase. Alright, let's begin with the Black Rose phase. Here we are going to draw an event card and place it in one of the available slots. Before we draw though, we would check to see if there are any events currently on the track. If there were, we would move them one space from left to right down the track, and should they ever move from that third middle space, they would be discarded on the far right here. Now there are a few additional rules floating around, but we'll cross that as we make our first draw. Here we have Bone Keylock. Now event cards are made up of 3 pieces of information. We've got the title of the card, we have the body of the event here, which is going to tell us what happens while this is out, and then we have placement instructions down the bottom. Here we can see that this one is to be placed in the first space, and when it does, the Black Rose itself gains 2 points on the Black Rose track. 1 and 2. Next, let's read the card. All grey rooms are already activated. Flip the room activation tokens. That means grey rooms are going to be a bit useless for a couple of rounds. It is worth noting as well that some events will grant the Black Rose points for being discarded as well as placed. Still in the Black Rose phase, our players now get a chance to draw up some quests. Every player that doesn't currently have a quest may draw, taking one into their supply. But even if they had quests, they are first given the opportunity to discard them before drawing up again. However, the Black Rose will gain points for every quest discarded this way. Let's take a sneaky look at a couple of the quests. Basically, we've got 2 kinds of quests. We've got these on the left here that require us to activate certain rooms on the board, and then we have the other types of quests, which could be a whole range of things. Having a look at the quest over here, Return to Rest. To complete this one, we need to activate one of the blue rooms called the Abyss. As reward for that, in addition to the normal room effects, we gain a little bonus, which could potentially help us out with our game. Completion of some quests will award the mage power points, but in this case, Return to Rest does not. Over here, we have the Elusive quest, and we would complete this any turn where we do not suffer more than 4 damage across the entire turn. As a reward for this one, we're going to gain 1 Black Rose point, but it should be noted that the 3 dots at the bottom left tell us that this card should only be included in games of 4, 5, or 6 players. Let's look at 2 more. Here we have another room quest. If we were to activate the red room, the Alchemic Laboratory, we gain no additional effects, but instead 1 Black Rose point for our trouble. The Sacred and Profane quest over here requires us to reveal at least 1 nature spell and 1 demonic spell. Completion of this grants us no special abilities, but 3 Black Rose points. Now, spell elements are printed on the card above the effect, but you'll notice looking at the spell here that it's also double-sided. Certain schools favor some elements over others, but most of the time you don't really know what you're after until you're off into the game. The next phase is the study phase. Here players will gain cards to add to their hand. Now it should be noted that every player has a different hand limit. Here you can see Rebecca has a hand limit of 8, and should they ever draw cards enough to take them over that limit, they must discard them to their memories. In this phase, each player should draw the top 2 cards from their grimoire and 2 more from any of the schools, barring of course the forgotten spells. Players may choose to take both spells from the 1 deck, or may choose to take 1 from each of 2 decks. The game cards are added to the player's hand, and the game continues. Now, it is very important to note that at any stage during the study phase, players may opt to discard 1 card from their hand to the discard pile of the school, not their memories. This is a crucial tactic throughout the game because it allows players to keep their decks lean, ensuring they draw the cards they need as soon as they need them. The next phase is the preparation phase, where players will take the cards from their hand and place up to 4 of them in the activation spots on their player board. Now, later on during the action phase, players will have the opportunity to cast these spells, beginning with spell 1, spell 2, and ending with spell 3. Now, it's important to note here that the order of these placed spells can't be changed, but each player does have a quick spell which can be used exclusive of this fixed order. Now, like I said earlier, this is essentially the meat and veg part of the game, because not only do players have to determine which spells they're going to put out, where they're going to place them, but they're also going to have to figure out, well, which side of the spell to use, because each spell drawn has 2 ways that it can be utilized. For example, our brand new Conspiracy card allows us to either redirect a player's spell, cancelling it, or reduce the next amount of damage suffered by 3 and earning Black Rose points. Both fantastic options, but how and when do you use it? This is what the game is all about. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the spells and abilities in this game because, quite honestly, across 7 different decks, we have a huge number of spells to contend with. In fact, across the 6 schools of magic, we have 72 different spells that can appear, and 10 more in our Forgotten deck. Now, it is safe to say that these spells will affect players in one way or another, either giving damage, preventing damage, changing damage, teleporting, summoning. There is so much going on. And it is probably quite important for players to have at least an idea of how and when these abilities can pop up. Thankfully for us all though, we have the Codex Arcanum, which contains not only a shorthand description of each of the spells in the game, but also a little bit of help regarding what we should choose and when. Let me take you through the schools. The School of Conspiracy contains spells which allow us to move, activate rooms, traps, steal points, quests, protection. It pairs nicely with Divination and Illusion and considers itself a medium to high difficulty. The School of Destruction focuses more on dealing wounds, destroying quests and events, and preventing players' movement across the board. It works well with Transmutation, Necromancy, Illusion, and it's a low difficulty school to get in with. The School of Divination allows for the easier collection of power points and completion of quests, healing, searching, drawing cards. It works really well with Conspiracy, Necromancy, and is of a medium to high difficulty level. The School of Illusion copies effects, earns power points, sets traps on actions, and allows control of evocations and other mages. It works well with Destruction, Conspiracy, Divination, and is of a high difficulty level. Necromancy focuses on wounding with evocations, those summons, and allows the player to focus on direct wounding and the accumulation of power points. Works really well with Destruction, Illusion, Conspiracy, and is of a low difficulty. Transmutation is a good middle ground, increasing close combat ability, movement and power points, works well with Destruction and Divination, and is of a medium difficulty. And then finally, we have the Forgotten. Now, these don't have a particular focus. You just got to know that these effects are uber powerful, and there is only one copy of each card available in the deck, meaning that if you gain one of these cards, you are going to be the only mage capable of its immense power. Right, so let's prepare our spells for the round. I'm going to prepare my Obscurity's Grasp spell, so I can summon a Landsconnect. I'm going to place this so that the active side will face down in my first spell slot. I'm then going to place my Sick Withering ability in the second slot, and finally my Deceiving Wind in the quick spell slot at the top. Let's see how this goes. Into the action phase. As Rebecca is our start player, she is going to go first. Over the course of the action phase, our players will be taking turns making 1 or 2 actions until all players are exhausted. Now, there are a number of combinations that players can utilize during their activation, but the gist is as follows. You can make 1 or 2 of any action, except you cannot cast 2 standard spells in a row. So you could make 2 actions, an action and a standard spell and a quick spell, an action and a quick spell, absolutely anything, just not 2 standard spells in a row. Well, first thing we've got to do is get out of our cell, so let's do that. And we may as well go ahead and utilize one of our actions to do so. These tokens will be flipped over once used, but basically allow us to move and activate a room, or attack and activate a room. Now, whenever we move, we're going to be able to move up to the number of spaces on our character card. Here it is 2 points. So let's get a wriggle on. Our current quest requires us to head to the Abyss, which is all the way down on the south side of the board, so we've got a bit of a trek ahead of us. We'll go 1 and 2. We could go to the cemetery, but because of the event currently in play, this one is out of action. So if we want to make full use of our turn, I think we need to head to the Oracle Room. Here, we now activate, flipping the activation marker, and we gain the effects of the room. Now, the activation marker has in shorthand exactly what the activation allows us to do, but we also have a more detailed version in the Codex Arcanum. Here, our Oracle Room allows us to pick any card of our choice from your grimoire and add it to our hand. We'll do that, taking Ice Grip, and then we'll reshuffle our grimoire. Our first action complete, we go ahead and flip over one of these physical action tokens to show that we're done. And now we have a choice. We can either go ahead and do a second action, or we can pass. And I think, of course, we're going to have to do a second action. So we've got a couple of choices here. We could either do our second physical action, we could do our spell sitting in the first slot, or we could do our quick spell. From memory though, our first spell is going to be just fine, so let's go ahead and cast that. We flip it up, and what are we doing? Obscurity's Grasp. Swap your position with an undead in the target room, or summon there a Landsconnect. Yep, I think it's time to summon. So we'll take a look at the map and we'll see where we can cast this thing. Looking at the card, we can see that it's going to target a room at any given range, so we can essentially put our Landsconnect anywhere. Let's go ahead and put him in the Black Rose room, but there may be much better strategic options available, so you've got to consider what the other players at the table are going to want to be doing. Now, to help us keep track of the models summoned under our control, we're going to go ahead and utilize these tiny little roses. I'm going to go ahead and place one in one of the little slots on the miniature, and then place a matching evocation card in the slot of the same number of roses. With this done, we discard the spell into our memories, and we move on to the next mage's activation. Let's go Nero. Now Nero's about ready to cause some trouble. He is looking to head to the room Arena, so I think we've got a decent path ahead of us. He'll begin by spending a physical action as well, and he's going to move up into the Mirrors room. Now Nero can now activate, but what does the room actually do? Well, according to the Codex, this allows us to copy the effects of an already activated room on the map. Now, unfortunately, we're not allowed to copy the Black Rose room or the Throne room, but we do have some options, especially because of that first event, activating all the grey rooms. Two pretty good options are the Cemetery over here. This will allow us to summon a Landsconnect of our very own, or we could go the Sacrificial Altar, which will allow us to inflict 1 damage on any model in play, and that includes our enemy mage, Rebecca. Well, I think we'd better even the playing fields. Let's get a Landsconnect of our very own. We place the model in the crypt with one of our rose tokens to show exactly who it belongs to. For his second action, Nero is going to use the Maelstrom ability, and this has got a couple of new things that we haven't seen before. Most importantly though, this is a very strong ability that causes instabilities in the room from which it was cast. So before we even think about resolving the effects of the spell, we have to damage the room that we're in. Here, we go ahead and take one of the cubes in our player color and place it in one of the slots surrounding the room. Should a room ever be filled all the way up with its slots, it would be flipped over completely unusable by the mages at the table, and the player that caused the most damage to the room over the course of the game would take the ability marker to score as points at the end of the game. Now this room in particular is not quite destroyed, so we can continue on, and let's see what else we've got going on here. We can see that this spell is going to target a room within line of sight, which means straight lines from any of the room's exits, up to a range of 2. So range works like 0, 1, 2. I'm going to go ahead and target the very room that our opponent Rebecca is in. So let's have a look at what this spell actually does. We're going to move all models from adjacent rooms to the target one, then we're going to inflict 2 points of damage on all models in that room. So first, we're going to move our Landsconnect into that room there, and then smash both of them with 2 points of damage. 2 points to the evocation, and 2 points for Rebecca herself. So yeah, that's a pretty good start to begin with. Let's head back to Rebecca's activation and use some more of her spells and abilities. Alright, well, I'm certainly not happy about that damage received there, so I'm going to go on the defensive a little bit, and we're going to play a protective spell here, as denoted by the shield in the top left. This one is going to allow us to reduce the next amount of wounds suffered by 3 points and earn us a power point. Now, because it is a protective ability, this card is kind of played in secret. We're going to place it back, face down, and we're going to cover the card in a protective token to show that we've used the ability, but also not spoil its effects, so that other players can still be caught off guard. Now, our second spell over here, this will allow us to inflict damage on an opponent who is within range of 1, but we've got no one that close. So I'm going to go ahead and use our second physical action to move up to 2 points, and then activate. Now in this instance, I'm anticipating Nero to do some moving next turn. So maybe he's bowling towards me, but there's no way that I could know for sure. I do definitely want to get in his way, so maybe sit in the Black Rose room over there, or maybe move up to the arena, but who knows where this guy's gonna head. Don't forget, we're trying to make our way down to the abyss, so I think, well, the best option for us right now might be to head to the Black Rose room, even though we can't activate it yet. It seems like a bit of a waste, but it might pay off. We're going to move, we're going to forgo our second movement action and the activation of the room, And that is that. We move back into Nero's turn. Now, he is a mage specializing in destruction, and destruction is certainly what he does best. We're going to go ahead and utilize the spell in its second slot, Unstable Arrow. Again, this one causes an instability in the room from which he is casting. So we place another of his colored cubes, and then we are going to cause 2 wounds against another character within range of 2. That character is of course going to be Rebecca, but Nero reveals his target, and then Rebecca says nah and reveals the Deceiving Wind card. We're going to reduce the next amount of wounds suffered by 3, taking 2 down to 0, and then we're going to earn 1 power point for our troubles. Very nice. It's not quite enough to bring us in line with the Black Rose, but it is certainly a start there. Nero, slightly furious about the failed attack, is now going to leave the Mirror's Room, which he activated earlier. I forgot to flip the activation token there, but he's now going to head to the arena by utilizing one of his physical actions. So we'll move him up a notch, just 1, and then we're going to activate, except keeping his quest in mind. Here, when we activate the arena room, instead of the normal room's effect, you can cast 1 spell from your hand. Nero peruses his hand and brings out the Ring of Fire. This is going to target a room at range of 2 within line of sight, and in that room he's going to inflict 2 points of damage to every model in there, and if a mage tries to leave the room with a physical action, they'll suffer 2 more damage. Crazy. But, of course, before we go ahead and do all that, we have to place an instability. Awesome. Destruction for days with this guy. Now, as far as the spell's effect, the Ring of Fire is going to go off in the Black Rose room there. 2 more damage to Rebecca. Ouch! That is a fantastic round for Nero there. We've completed our quest, gaining 1 more power point. Awesome. Look at him go. Very good keeping up there. Back to Rebecca's activation, and we've only got 1 option left. She only has the spell in the second slot, so let's go ahead and cast that. Hopefully we're in range. Sick Withering. This is going to allow us to choose a target within range of 2, cause 3 points of damage to them, and then if we had anyone else within range of 1, we would be able to inflict another point of damage onwards. Now, I would love to target the Landscanet, but unfortunately it is not within line of sight, so I'm going to have to pick Nero here to receive the 3 damage and forego any additional damage points floating around. What an awesome hit. 3 points of damage to Nero. We add the played card to her memories, and that is it for Rebecca. Now Nero has 1 final spell left to cast, and guess what? A second Maelstrom ability. Let's cause some hell. Before we go anywhere, we add an instability to the room thanks to the symbol, and then we choose a room within range of 2, from which we're going to pull all adjacent models. Now, we could go ahead and pick the bibliothèque there that would pull in the Evocation, Rebecca, but also Nero himself. So let's go ahead and choose the Throne Room. It's still within range of 2 and in line of sight, so let's go. We begin by moving the 2 models in, and then 2 damage to each. 1, 2. And unfortunately for us, 2 more points of damage to the summon. It only has 3 health. That's enough to take him out for good. We remove Landscanet from the board, and that is it. And with both players having exhausted all of their available actions, we move into the evocation phase. Here, players may activate all of their summoned creatures. And seeing as though Nero is the only one with a summon left, it's all on him. Evocations can do 2 things. They can either move and attack, or just plain old attack. There's no luck involved in damage, so these guys are essentially walking cannonballs, which is great, and we have a stats card to show off what they can do. Here we can see that the Landscanet has 2 movement, 2 points of attack, and 3 life. Let's move in, get a bit up close and personal with our enemy Rebecca, but there's nothing more he can do because he is not in range to attack. So with that done, we move out of the evocation phase and into the cleanup phase. Here we would discard any unplayed spells, moving them to the memories pile, with the exception being any traps and protection abilities. So let's say we didn't actually play this one before. still had its protection token on it, we would still remove the card, but instead of discarding it, we would take it back into hand. We flip over any used action tokens, refreshing them for the next round, and we do the same for any activated rooms. Here, Nero used both the Arena and the Mirror's Room, and Rebecca got into the Oracle's Room. Usually we'd flip over all of the grey ones as well, the Cemetery, the Sacrificial Altar, and the Crypt. But there is of course that event that's keeping them activated. After this, we would check to see if there are any totally unstable rooms, that is, they were full of instability tokens, and if there were, we would then flip them, awarding the activation tile to the player with the highest number of damage tokens present. If, however, there is a tie in who caused the most instability, the activation token instead is given to the Black Rose. Here we have the Mirror Room's destroyed side. From this point on in the game, no mages are able to utilize the room's effect, nor are they able to assign any further instability tokens. It's simply there for passage to the rooms around it. Finally, we check to see if any player has reached at least 30 points, and if they have, the game is over. Final scores are determined, as mentioned earlier, and the winner becomes the new Grand Master. If, however, players haven't reached at least 30 points, as in this case, a new round begins again. As I alluded to earlier, as points increase, we move into the different moon phases of the game. Here, we gain different quest decks and different event decks, but aside from the increase in power of those cards, the gameplay is much the same. Like I said, this is all-out player versus player action. Now, that's as far as I'll go as far as the rules explanation. Honestly, it's just really hard to play a PvP game when it's just you behind the camera. But I will go through and talk about all of the different room powers available through this game, because if anything, that is going to be the key to understanding some of the strategies available in the game. Firstly, we have the blue rooms. The Mirror Room, as we saw earlier, allows us to reactivate a room that has already been activated that round, except we can't choose the Black Rose Room or the Throne Room. The Oracle Room allows us to take a card from our Grimoire and add it to our hand, reshuffling the Grimoire. And finally, the Abyss allows the player to target one player within range of one and send them back to their cell. All damage is removed and they're not even considered defeated. It's just essentially a free heal. Next, we have the yellow rooms, beginning with the Observatory. This room allows the player to draw the top 3 quest cards from the current quest deck and swap them with one of their own quest cards. There are no real restrictions here, except that a player must have a quest to swap to be able to do this action. The Biblioteca allows a player to take a new spell card from one of the schools of magic. They may either choose to take the top card from the deck or the top uncovered card from its associated discard pile. And finally, the Sanctuary allows a player to heal up to 2 points of damage on themselves. For our green rooms, we begin with the Forge. Activating in the Forge allows the mage to move one room and perform an attack against an opponent. The Garden allows you to place one of your own coloured instabilities within a range of 1, so you can place them in the garden itself or in one of the rooms surrounding it. And then finally, the Treasure Room allows the player to gain 1 power point. Next we have Red, and the Alchemic Laboratory allows you to draw 2 cards from your Grimoire, with players discarding down to their hand limit if they go over. The Arena allows the player and one other player of their choosing to activate to cast one of their prepared spells. This is pretty unique as it allows a bit of play out of order. Finally, the Summoner Room allows the player to summon a Sabero. Saberos have 3 points of movement, 2 points of attack, and 2 points of health, and every time they attack, they are also able to convert one existing damage into a damage of the player's colour, which really helps with picking up trophies, slaying the other mages. The Sabero is one of my favourite miniatures in the game. Next we have the Purple Rooms. At the Armory, a player can play a protection card from their hand, replacing any other prepared spell, whether it had been activated previously or not. The new protection spell entering play is considered activated. Next, we have the Throne Room, which can become one of the most fought over rooms in the game. This allows the player to take the first player crown. Finally, we have the Pleasures Room, which allows the player to draw the top card from the current quest deck. This allows the player to have up to 2 quests, but if they choose to do this action while they have 2 quests, they must discard down to 2. And this is one of the only ways players can go up to the maximum of 2 active quests in the game. Finally, we have the Grey Rooms. Beginning with the Cemetery, as you saw, we can summon one of those Landscanettes. We have the Sacrificial Altar, which will inflict 1 point of damage on any model in play. And then we have the Crypt, which allows the player to look at the top 3 cards of their memories, returning 1 to their hand. Now, the final room in the game is the Black Rose Room itself. And this one here cannot be activated until the second moon phase. This is the room that allows players to gain the Forgotten spells. The instructions are as follows. The player must discard 4 cards from their hand into their memories, and this will allow them to draw the top 3 cards from the Forgotten School deck. They can choose 1 to keep, and the rest are returned to the deck at the bottom. Now, these spells are totally worth looking at, so let's have a quick sneak at them as well. First, we have the Echo of Revenge. Here we have a protective spell. The next time you suffer wounds, inflict the same number of wounds to all other models. Oh my goodness. Maximum 5 damage to each model, but still, that is insane. Its other side, right here. If you are defeated, heal all your health, nobody earns power points, and then you get to defeat the mage that had the most wounds on you, resolving the defeat as if you were first. Insane! Eviscerate, which inflicts 5 damage to a target model ignoring any protective spells, or defeat the target if they have at least 1 wound. What? Intertwine Fate, the caster may choose any room in the map, and all mages present in the room must discard their quick spell, with the caster gaining 2 power points for every mage hit, up to a max of 6 power points. That's pretty cool. Intertwine Fate, look at 4 quests from the previous moon deck, pick 1, and take its rewards, earning 2 additional power points. Lightning Storm inflicts 3 damage to all models in play. The hit mages cannot move during the next round. And then its other effect, inflict 3 damage to all models in play. The hit mages cannot activate rooms during their next action. Time Stop, cast 2 spells from your hand, earning 2 power points. Or all mages in play discard 1 of their ready cards and you earn 4 power points. Infamy of Crete, the caster may select any room on the map, 2 rooms adjacent to the target room become unstable, and you take their activation tokens. Noting here though, that you cannot make unstable the Throne Room or the Black Rose Room, of course. The second ability here is to summon the Infamy of Crete, who can act immediately. Let's take a look at this guy, and what a beast he is. 2 points of movement, 0 attack, but more on that in just a sec. 6 points of health. Its special ability, every time the Infamy of Crete enters a room, inflict 4 wounds to each model in that room. Insane. You want to see why this guy is so crazy? Well, unfortunately, he's just a token right now. But we will get a miniature once the stretch goals arrive, I promise. Moving right along, we have Death Delirium. Inflict 8 wounds to the target model within range of 2. If that target doesn't die by the end of the turn, remove the 8 damage. So this is, 8 damage is plenty to kill something, but that's risky. What about its second ability? Inflict 3 wounds to all models in play that already have at least 1 wound. Devastation. All mages within 2 rooms of the caster's own room lose 3 power points, and the caster earns 2 power points for each mage hit. Its alternative ability, all models within 2 rooms from your room suffer 2 wounds, and you can convert 3 points of damage each one. Very cool. Disintegration. Assign 5 instabilities to target room within range of 2. Its second ability, any target within range of 2 will receive 7 points of damage. Our last forgotten spell is Soul Entrapment, and this is a kind of unique one. It utilizes the trap abilities, which we've actually not gone over yet. But to clear that up real quick, trap cards are played just like protection cards. They are placed face down in a prepared spell slot, with a trap token placed above. These cards are resolved once their conditions are met. So in this case, One of two things could happen. Here, the player will not have to lock it in. They could either choose to activate its top ability. If a target enters a grey room, you can steal 4 of their power points. On the other hand, if they enter a yellow room, that model will have 6 wounds inflicted. And then if they're defeated, the caster will gain 6 power points without anyone else earning any. That one is a sniper move if ever I've seen one. Now, I did film an unboxing for this game, but I was pretty sick when I did it, and it just didn't come off too well. I was too croaky and snotty and all that. And instead of just giving it all up and just being like, yeah, let's just play the game, I do want to show you how this game comes back together, because it is so damn impressive, and it really itches that board game induced OCD kind of thing that I know I kind of get sometimes. Anyway, so right here we've got all of our events, our summons, our quests, we've got all of our spells, schools of magic and stuff, we've got all of our tiles down here, and all of our little reference cards. Over here we've got some activation tokens and some beastly miniatures. Here's a close-up. And then we've got room for the events and Black Rose board, all of our player boards, and a lid to keep everything safe, right? It's a pretty fat box, so we've got a couple more layers to go. Next layer, more minis. Here's a flash up of some of those guys because they are so damn impressive. And then finally, we've got the top layer here with all of our character pieces, our starter tokens, and just a couple of little extra bits and pieces held under that Black Rose room there. We have one final lid, which may or may not go on. There we go. We've got our rulebook and codex, and then a lid to take it all home. Guys and gals, what an amazing production this is. Now, I'm not going to really talk production when it comes to the review side of things. I feel like that speaks for itself, but this is the time to talk about it. So let's head off to the studio and I'll let you know what I think. Oof, that is a beautiful looking box, right? But I'm not going to say too much about the looks side of things. Straight away, I want to talk about the gameplay. Yes, it's a kind of a deck builder. You start off with a miniature deck of some pretty cool spells, but then you can diversify. You can enter some of the other magic schools. You can get new spells and abilities that either work really well with yours or provide one-off bonuses that you might need to get a certain quest done. I don't know. This game is kind of nuts. There are just so many options available for gameplay here. Like, what did I say? Like 70 plus spells and abilities floating around. What? And I'm not locked into how I customize my characters. Honestly, every one of those spells is kind of up for grabs. It's a bit full on, right? And this is definitely one of the things I appreciate most about the game, is it's just going to allow for such huge amounts of replayability. I've never had a game that offers quite so much choice, but not in the sandbox Uwe Rosenberg kind of way. This is a very succinct game. You need to kill your opponents, you need to kill them as often as you can to get the points. You want to do quests. The objectives are all there. The way that you score these points are all there. But it's the way that you accomplish these things that spices up every time. It's like playing Unreal Tournament, or, I don't know, that probably shows my age a little bit. It's like playing a shooter game where you shoot I don't know. The maps are always the same, but the way that you play, it's very much dependent on how your opponents are playing and what you feel like doing at the time. And this is something that this game is really going to bring to the fore. Player choice is going to drive not just the fun element of the game, but also its complexity and the challenge. You really do want to be facing off against opponents who are of a similar level of competency in the game. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. It means new players are probably going to get whooped every time they play. But if it means you've got a group of players who have never played this before, you can all grow together and incorporate this into your gameplay lifestyle. I really don't see an end date for this one at all, which is amazing. Now, kind of tying into that, I feel like you're only going to get the most out of this game once you fully understand what each of the schools of magic bring to the table, and at least have a really solid understanding of what those rooms can do for you. Because, I mean, in our little example there, I was chasing after what our quests were telling us to chase after, and that's fine. But these rooms offer such an advantage if you know how to use them. So if you want to get good, you probably got to study, and the Codex, well, that is your source book, and you should really dedicate some time to at least reading what each of the schools are about, and then at most diving into each of those spells individually. Now, it is, yes, a player versus player game, so you better make sure that the other people in your gaming group are up for such confrontation. It's not always called for, I'll tell you that, but sometimes it hits the table just right. Now, there are some expansions available. I have the Kronos expansion. It arrived with this one here, which I've not had a look at all just yet. That might offer some expanded gameplay options, but I know nothing so far. So we'll leave it with just the PvP aspect right now. Component quality is obviously through the roof. Ludus Magnus, I believe, made a name for themselves out of miniature creation rather than game creation, but they've really come into their own, and they're offering some really interesting things in the scene right now. I mean, Sign Tempor was using some gameplay mechanics like I've never seen before, and this is really giving a breath of life to the probably oversaturated deck building market. Yeah, it's not the only one breathing life into the scene, don't worry about that, but it's certainly doing its part, and I'm just absolutely stoked with it. It is a dead simple game to learn how to play. The round structure is simple. Anyone can pick this one up. Hell, you can even play this reactively, not knowing what's going on. But like I said, you will have that edge as soon as you understand the way the different schools and rooms work. I'm a big fan of it. Not that I'm going to be able to get it to the table very much, but that's just the gaming group. If you guys have a competitive gaming group and want to be at each other's throats, I highly recommend tracking down a copy. Maybe sit down at a con and give it a whirl, because the only detractor for me is that the box is so damn big and there is so much content, but that is really first world problems for us board gamers out there. Yeah, I'm running out of shelf space, but there is a wonderful game in the giant box. Alright, let's call it there. That's enough from me. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and do all the things that you guys can do to help this channel grow. It's been a wonderful journey so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with you all. As always, guys, my name is Michael. This is Bits of Board. We'll catch you next time.